So, Maahierah, welcome to the Future of Employee Experience Season 2. I'm super excited that we could finally have this conversation and this chat. I've been looking forward to interviewing you since Season 1, so here we are. Maahierah is Sorry?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy. And Maahierah, so you are a people scientist, a data scientist, and an organizational psychologist. Tell me about the people scientist part, because that's something a little more interesting to me.
So in South Africa, it's not necessarily a term that's quite familiar, but similarly was employee experience. You know, not too long ago, it wasn't a term that most people knew of or used quite often. It's basically looking for people solutions using data. And as a psychologist, that's usually what you do. You look at data to find people solutions and to make a difference.
It's very cool. I like it a lot. And tell me now, I mean, so now this is where you are now. Tell me, where did you come from and a little bit more about your background?
So born and bred in Cape Town, South Africa, conceived though in Saudi Arabia, and hoping to explore a lot more of the world. Initially I started in clinical psychology. I thought I was going to be a child psychologist. But innately, I think it's always been psychology. I then worked in a clinical setting for 5 years, decided I want to make more of a difference, started working at scale, moved to industrial organizational psych, and then moved on to data to make a larger difference and impact at scale.
It's a very interesting progression. So tell me, what kind of shaped your path to working with data and analytics from the EX side?
So look, it's always been, I think I've always had this insatiable need or hunger to find people solutions. And to find people solutions, usually you require data. So similarly, in every setting, when I want to find out something, if I started in my career, I started as finding, so when I want to do a treatment plan, it's finding, okay, so what's the history, what's the developmental milestones, what's the biopsychosocial, what are previous programs the individuals come from, and then we build a treatment plan. And that was individual, some family history and all of these things. And employee experience is kind of similar, you know, so what are attributes, what are interests of the individual, what are past experiences, what are previous employment, what are competencies, developmental, and what are aspirational things that the individuals would like to do. But just in organizational psychology, you can do that at scale. You know, you can have impact at scale. Yeah. And that's then why I'm in data, because, well, pure data is that I want to find more aggregated people solutions. And when you work with such large sets of data, you need better technology and tools to understand that, synthesize it, aggregate it, and then give more predictive or insightful people decisions.
Absolutely. And I think it's a field that at the moment is emerging. But I think, you know, as we start to look more at employee experience and we talk around the data points around it, I think it's something is going to become a huge need. If a company isn't already looking at it, they certainly should be. Would you agree that it's a trend that needs to be watched?
Definitely. I think it's the intimacy of all these other things. You know, data is information. You know, sometimes when we say data, everyone's like, oh, it's, you know, it's technology and it's AI and all of these things, but it's information about our people to make better business decisions, because once you make your people happy, your business would be happy. It's definitely a trend to look out for. And in employee experience, what I think are big trends to look out for would be things like holistic well-being, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know those are big, broad umbrella terms. I mean, who am I speaking to, Sally? You would know. But it's the data around those things and the nuances around those things that are important to people, which will make them want to unlock discretionary effort.
Absolutely. So, So, I mean, I'm going to ask you a little bit more around that, but I was having a very interesting interview on one of the other future EX I did for season 2, and we were talking around what she was terming as the colorful analytics of employee experience, and what are the data points that people are looking at. And we were saying, data for her, one of the big trends was looking at the metric of wellness. What are some of the metrics that you think that organizations should start to look at around employee experience?
Definitely wellness. I mean, so wellness is one of, I always say there's big, broad umbrella terms, but it's more of the intimacy around wellness. When once with employee experience, once you do your personas, your profiles, and all of those things, it's more around the psychographic things than on what's important to employees. Because we say wellness, but wellness means very different things to everyone else. It might mean cycling for you. It could mean, walking and listening to the waves on the ocean for me. But it's hard. No, but it's just hard. And that's where data helps. It's the intimacy around it. It's data that exists on your employees. What are their wellness trends? And it's not data, it's data inside the organization or data that's available, obviously with content, on your employees. But then also, what solutions do you build around that? So it's around, we touched on this early on psychological safety. What does that mean for people in your organization? What is psychological safety? And how would people exhibit that and allow that to come to life? And there's an element of wellness in there, hey? Because if you look at most data articles or research that's being written, is that this form of trust or feeling psychologically secure, it's more of, there's a lot of, they say, building resilience, building grit. There's an element of psychological safety in there as well. And you need to understand, how do we create environments where lower stress levels can occur? And positive, not negative stress.
Absolutely. And then how do you measure that, like, year on year, and how do you start to track that? I think that's where a lot of companies are struggling, is that first step of like, how do I even start, and if you talk about DEI and the measurements around that, like things like, how do you measure inclusion and belonging to see that, initiatives are making a difference, and I think that's where everybody gets quite nervous, and it starts to become that single point in a single survey that is the entire basis. What are your thoughts on that?
So, well, I think there's lead indicators and there's lag indicators. So lead indicators are things like how long after an employee was with the organization did they stay within the organization. That's lag indicators. So how long do they leave? What's the point in the survey? All of these things. But then they are, and that's what we're going to have to become a lot more comfortable with bringing into the organization, or some of these other, nuanced metrics of something similar to, if I could just use an example, my team, I came back from leave and I had to meet with my team. And this meeting was in the diary, and it was we were going to discuss quite a few things around deliverables and what we had planned for the year and all of these things. And it was a cameras on meeting. And my team, when we put on cameras, my team was like, oh, MS, I'm still in PJs, and, we're still all in PJs. And I was like, that's cool. But for me, that was an indication that they could come as they are. That was an indication that even when we had a meeting set up and they knew this meeting was set up, they didn't feel the need to like brush up and do these things. And I reflected on it in that point. I said, it's comforting for me to feel that no matter where you are currently, that you could just come to the meeting, and that's okay. So some of your indicators where you're going to check for psychological safety or belonging or some of these things is when people can say that, you know what, life can be busy. My kid is going to come to me and talk to me about it, and I can feel comfortable to answer my kid on a meeting. I can say, can I mute quickly, because I'm going to answer my kid. Or if they were to mute, they don't necessarily do. And it's not to say, and we're going to need leaders. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the tangible measurement things. We're going to need leaders to equip themselves to build out those metrics within the team. And that's why I say it's the intimacy of what exactly happens in your team.
Yes.
We get that information. We then build metrics that's 100% aligned to the team functioning and the culture. And that's how we will then shift the form of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's
Does that
very
make sense?
interesting. No, it does. And I think what's interesting to me about that, and I know we're kind of digressing and I'll get us back on track now, but
no worries. This is a good conversation.
No, it's very interesting because what I think about what you're saying and what I understand of it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're almost looking then at taking those data sets at a team or organizational or divisional level and creating a persona kit based on those intimate metrics where you can target EX offerings and communications that's actually based on a team or divisional persona. Am I understanding correctly?
So it's multi-layered, multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one you do is, so what's the persona for your strategy requires? So this is my thinking, and my thinking is warped. I'm happy for us to, review this. So we need to understand, what does the business want? I don't want to just focus. It's not just not just Maahierah, the touchy-feely chick that's all about people. Although that's what we need to influence leaders on. So the business wants to deliver. Let's take a contact center, for example. Contact center, the business wants to have certain metrics. For that metrics, we need certain individuals or a certain culture. Like a contact center has a certain culture in which, I think there was one, I forget his name, he said the organization needs to have a certain smell. Like you walk in a forest, there's a smell in the organization.
Yes, I love that.
And there's a different smell. There's a different smell that's required for the contact center to what would be required for an investment company. So when I was at Lufthansa, it was a different culture we were driving for what was at asset management, as an example. Sure. So what you look at is, what's the profile of the type of generous people that we require. Then you scale that and you say, okay, so at different management levels across the organization, what are the key themes that we're finding out? And you look at, so it's I think it's a general term, but it's psychographic information, right? And so it's your demographic information and then your psychographic information. That is your employees' needs, wants, interests. So what training are they doing? What are they saying, the career aspirations? What is the promotion, talent, mobility, all of those things. And then if you give recognition and you give additional benefits, what do they utilize it on? What do they spend these recognition things on?
Yeah, what's the uptake?
Then you find out, and if there is a technology solution that we built on, what's the utilization of that solution? Sure. What things are they looking at? So then you dissect per management level, because there's age nuances, there's tenure nuances, there's all these nuances. And then you have a management level persona. And then you move it to business units. So what has this? So if this is the generalist, we can then scale and build solutions for business, because that's what you'll embed what's lacking in the different management levels. You then tweak your employee value proposition to, because your employee value proposition is not going to change. Your promise is going to remain the same. Yeah. Standard, whatever you, we call it. I know at my current organization, we call it different things as to what is going to bring about a certain culture, but we know it's culture, it's reward, it's opportunities, it's leadership, it's organization. So what we will then ask is, what in these nuances, in these different levels of management, do we find that we need to tweak for this level of management? Because there's a different requirement at junior management. What do they want from leaders? And then at middle management, what does leaders need to give the employees? And what do senior management need to give middle management leaders?
Yes.
And that's in your broad-based tailored employee value proposition and nuances that you ramp up. What is then it's cascade, it's sliced again into different business units. And does it align to that? So in different business units, you'll find that they are doing it well. And that's where you can have your lessons learned. That's when you can have showcasing those leaders. Actually, in this business, they differ from the general view that is coming out. But that means they're doing something well here. So once we drive a change in behavior, let's showcase them.
Yeah.
Let's showcase what you're doing, and that then falls into your engagement, your change management, your comms plans, and all of those things. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yes, thank you. No, I think you've explained and articulated it so well for people that often ask this question. So I thank you. That was really good. So now I'm going to get us back on track, because we know that I have a something shiny tendency. So what, I mean, if we talk back around data and EX, what do you think are the non-negotiables that EX leaders need to be focusing on in this space for this year? Let's just, we can't talk to future these days. So let's just say for this year, what do you think is like a non-negotiable that EX leaders need to say, okay, like data-wise, this is what we've got to look at?
Data. Data is a non-negotiable. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. Having data is a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the trends I spoke about. Data
Yeah.
on what would bring about holistic wellness, what
Yes.
would bring about diversity, what would bring about inclusion, what would bring about equity. I think those are the big things. I mean, we see it all over. I don't know, my LinkedIn is like slamming with this, what's it, the great resignation, you know?
Yes.
As some organizations feel it, some organizations don't. But what they're saying is bringing about the great resignation is employees wanting to do something different, wanting to do something that's ignited to their passion. And the more you ask about what ignites people, what their aspirations are, what their needs are, you tweak your EVP around that. You tweak your initiatives and your interventions around that. So data is core, but having a healthy state of mind and have a healthy state of mind for employees is going to be what's important. So it's about understanding your data, getting that intimacy with your employees, and trying to do that at scale. In every individual that is within EX, there's a lot of information that is at hand in every organization. It's at hand, it's available. Start there, start small.
Yeah.
You have data sets, but also know that you can create data sets. But once every 6 months is not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Once every 6 months, once every 12 months, it's not enough. It's enough to find out, are you on track and are you shifting in the right direction? But there is going to be a momentum that's need to happen, and leaders need to be on board, displaying that empathy, displaying that understanding that holistic wellness is going to drive results.
Yeah, I think what I see all the time, and it's one of the things that talk specifically focus on it as an actual EX pillar, is the conversation element. And what you're talking about is obviously you're talking about the big data collection, but the pulse check-in data points for us have proved to always be much more valuable.
Definitely.
And it allows, because the opportunity for empathy, for conversation with your employees can't be held every 6 months. A pulse goes out, or a question, a survey, a poll goes out, and people give you that they give you the gift of their feedback. You must return in kind and give back the gift of a reply. And even if the answer is no, or we don't know, that's still an answer. So, I think that's definitely where I see that people are not using data to change the behavior. They're using it too big instead of, as you say.
And then it comes to the next survey, and people are like, but I answered this in the previous survey and nothing's happened since then.
And you still haven't told me what the results of that one was. So why am I going to do it now?
But I also want to point out here, pulse surveys, the reason why it's called pulse surveys is because it's as close as your pulse. It's the beat of your pulse. It's the beat of the organization. So when I speak about data, it's not actually the large sets of data that exists in the HR folder. It is because this is where the smaller teams are going to get involved in building the metrics that they have to track. So it is the team engagements, it is the on-floor things that happen. So if we used to say in a meeting room, for example, let's take it offline every meeting, that can be a measurement.
Yes.
That's a measurement to say, we actually don't say let's take it offline. So, or as a team, we want to reduce let's take it offline because we want to be more deliberate in what we discuss within meetings, because the let's take it offline creates confusion, it creates chaos, it creates backbiting, whatever the case may be. And those are unhealthy attributes because they don't bring about psychological safety. So they don't bring about diversity, and they don't bring about equity, and they don't bring about inclusion.
That's so true. Yeah. A very good point, and that is a metric to work towards. No, I think that's great. It's such a great example, and one I hadn't even thought of. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So moving on, I mean, if we talk about leveling up, what do you think are, I mean, just looking back at your career through EX, which has been, you've had quite a lot of opportunities to do different things. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that EX leaders are likely to face in their careers?
Look, I think now there's this big hype because we are on blended ways of work, and we people are at, it's this big hype around technology being a solution. And I think that can sometimes be a concern for EX. We're like, oh, the EX program is actually a digital program.
Yes.
And that's not really the case. You know, the EX program has to be a digital solution that we launch. And I think sometimes we want to push a lot of money into a piece of technology. And it's not the case, but sometimes usually they say employee experience, it has to be, you know, a different solution in which we have people engage or communicate, or all of these things. And I think it's finding the balance between building humanistic experiences and using technology to facilitate that and aid that, and understand what is going to be the physical experience and what is going to be the digital experience, and how do we use technology to enhance that? Because let's face it, moments that matter is essential. And we don't know what the moments are. Employee experience is useless without moments that matter. And life in itself is a aggregation of lots of moments and milestones. Employee experience is no different. And sometimes we look at employee experience that, you know, the milestones and the moments that we need to look at is the value chain, the HR value chain, you know, onboarding, recruitment, career development, all of those things. And that's not necessarily the case. It's finding the psychographic insights around the moments that matter for our people when they are at a particular milestone in their life. And that's the intimacy that needs to come from. So if I think there's a challenge, is that technology is not the solution. It's about how do we harness technology to get more intimate with the employees. It's this difficult balance between doing at scale and being very intimate with our people.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, in the way that you're putting it, it makes me think a lot of Instagram. I mean, the entire platform success is based on the fact that the moments that matter to every individual are completely different. And the algorithm around Instagram and everything is built off the fact that if a moment that matters to me is central around food, or the things that I'm choosing to share as the things that matter to me, influences how Instagram will interact with me. So, you know, I think it's that mindset of understanding that we can't define what the moments that matter are, because some people, when they arrive and somebody hasn't put up a banner with their name on, won't care, but other people, that'll be a huge thing. So there's so many nuances, as you say.
And, you know, Sally, I love the fact that you use that example, because that's a double-edged sword, you know, in that this is what people are exposed to. I am exposed to that on Netflix. You go on my profile, you'll see something completely different. You go into my husband's profile, you'll see very different. And you go to on my kids' profile and you'll see, you know, something different, similar to Spotify, similar to Instagram. And that is where the technology comes in to personalize things. And people are used to that. We're exposed to that. How long is Instagram and Netflix and Spotify around? So our employees are exposed to that. Our employees are used to that. That's what organizations, exactly. And that's what organizations are going to have to get right and fine tune as soon as possible, because the organizations that get that right are going to get the people as well, because they have this form of doing something at scale, yet having it so personalized. And that's where the technology comes from. have a digital roadmap, but know that the digital roadmap needs to bring about the intimacy.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about it in that data chat last year, and we were saying, the expectation that has been built for an individual is that you will serve me completely 100% customized, curated content that is relevant only to me. That is the base level expectation. So when I'm seeing things on my employee engagement portal or software that is not relevant to me as an individual, let alone my business unit, my division, I will disengage, because it is obvious to me that you don't know who I am and you're not using my data in the way that I have grown accustomed, So
because it happens everywhere. Takealot does it for me. Superbalist does it for me.
Yeah.
I'm so used to it because all these Amazon does it. So, all of these things that you interact with, it does it. So why is my employer different?
Yeah. Why are you not serving me a policy that is relevant to my life stage right now? If I've just told you that I'm going to be adding to my family, why am I not seeing policies on parental leave? That is the subconscious expectation of the employee. Why must I look for something and search for it? Because you know these things about me and I'm used to getting it,
Exactly.
Oh, we got some tough shoes to fill, hey? I hope everyone's listening. Where's that budget at? Maahierah and I have a huge piece of tech to build.
Yeah.
So what are the new skills that you would advise that people leaders learn and master? Because as we've discussed now, there's a big new world coming. And what do you think you need to know?
So look, I think it's a lot of what we spoke about now. If you're someone in people and you don't work Excel and you don't work numbers, get familiar with it. Get familiar with synthesizing large sets of data.
Yeah.
But I think it's no new skills as well. It's the old skills. It's listening. It's empathy. It's respect. Because having that listening about information, which will build your data set, which will allow you to have build interventions that suits employees' needs and wants and interests and preferences. So yeah, I know, sometimes people's like, oh, this psychologist is just too much in Maahierah, this touchy-feely things. But I honestly think it's not just a piece of technology, because it is holistic well-being, it is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the technology, yes, it has to help you, but it's taking that time to listen to what your people want, to having those one-on-ones, to having those team engagements, taking that information, synthesizing it, and being responsive and adaptive to what you give. So if anything, if I narrow it down to a few, it's being a lot more agile with your interventions. We say agility and agile with your interventions. So once you get a piece of data, be quick to give a turnaround on it. And then it's all sets of listening and being empathic and getting closer. I always tell some of my members, it's loving people in and loving people out. And what makes good relationships with people and these milestones and moments in life is emotions, it is feelings, it's love. And there's got to be a form of love that you give your employees. It's just it,
100%. And they need to feel it,
Yeah, I did my thesis on perceived organizational support, organizational commitment, and turnover intention. So how an employee perceives the organization to care and psychological safety is 100% embedded in that. That will affect your level of commitment you give the organization. Whether it's effective, like I 100% stand with this organization, or I'm just a form of presenteeism, I'm here to do my job and get money, normative and all these different forms of commitment. And that will affect how long you are with the organization, how much you deliver, and what's your level of discretionary effort you give to an organization. And it's 100% around, it's embedded in emotions. It's embedded in how people feel. And at a particular moment in their life, and whether you satisfy that need or that interest.
Yeah, Lauren at our at Talk has written some really interesting things around social exchange theory, speaking to those exact points. And I think that that's definitely something that people need to spend some time on looking and saying, what is the offer of exchange here? What are we actually, if we yeah.
Sorry, on that, Sally, is that I think there's a new social contract that's going to need to come.
Okay.
And I mean, I think there's a lot of I don't know if you, I mean, I'm a nerd, my Spotify is used for podcasts, but it's a new social contract that's going to need to be about, in that it's not only a working relationship where you work and I pay for money, it's about whether you meet some of my needs. Because when I have a kid, are you giving me, this school gives us, this employment gives us subsidy to kids schooling, as an example,
that's huge.
So it's not about whether I get money or this or that. It's what, based on my lifestyle point, are the benefits that you give, does it meet my needs? And there's more of a social contract in how we engage together, how we interact together, and how we deliver work together, whether it's bum in seat. I mean, that's another debate, whether it's bum in seat or whether it's remotely. And what's that social contract that's built on trust that exists within the organization. And that brings about some of that social exchange that you spoke about earlier.
But I think the social contract's a really important point, because I mean, if you look at, if you look at, not even talking about in our own country, but if you talk about globally, when you start looking at people rioting, and I know when there was Black Lives Matter, there was a lot of talk around that. And I thought Trevor Noah did such an interesting talk where he spoke about it, and he said, understanding that the people that are rioting and protesting, the social contract between them and the government, or the leadership, in their mind was broken. So the social bounds that say you can't do this, that contract has been broken. So that's why those things are occurring. And when you talk about a social contract, in people's minds, that means different things to different people. But if you're not, as an organization, fulfilling your part of the perceived deal on the social side of things, then the employee is very unlikely to respond in kind, even if policy dictates that they must. And you see that with the essential workers and people that have to be in the front line versus people in the same organization that have the option of the hybrid work. You see that there's a very big social exchange, social contracting conversation that's going around fairness. And if I'm essential, what are my added benefits or payoffs that make this essentialness worth my time,
And that is the nuances and the multi-layered and how multi-dimensional employee experience is. And also in the example that you gave, diversity and equity is such a big, inclusion and equity was so big in that example already. And that's why I'm saying these are big ticket items that is extremely nuanced. That is going to be, and there is no silver bullet, and there is no one-line answer, it's just going to meet everyone's needs. But the closer you get to it, and the closer you get to discussing these things, that's already you closer to some of the solutions for it.
Yeah, it's big. But so if we have to say there's one thing that people take away from our conversation today and implement in their leadership right now, what is the one thing that you think people should do?
As in EX, people
EX, as in data. What is the one thing that you'd say to a leader, like, you've got to do this thing? This is the one thing. What is that thing?
Well, acknowledge and accept that you can't do this alone.
Okay.
That's the one thing. Acknowledge and accept that EX is not a man alone thing. Knowing that EX is a skill of persuasion. Sorry, that was my other skill that people need. Is a skill of persuasion. In that employee experience is so embedded in so many experiences. It's what affects my environment is my role with my colleagues, my experience with my colleagues. It's my experience with the facility. It's my experience with my line manager, it's my experience with supervisors, it's my experience with the head of the organization, it's my experience with the platforms of the organization. And knowing that there's a lot of things you're going to have to rally and support and move to get to that nuggets of doing it. So it's a bit of an orchestrated role, and accept that this is not a, planned, straightforward. I can do this on my own, and I'm going to put it in one plan, and it's going to happen. It's going to take a lot of people, because every individual in your organization contributes to it, and that's the message that you're going to need to land and allow people to know that just as I want a certain promise and expectation, I also deliver that to others.
Yes.
Because what creates psychological safety in my team is me as well.
Yes.
It's how I engage. It's how I speak. It's how I interact. It's the unwritten rules that I also bring about into the space. So in that, employee experience can be done at scale, but there's an individual element that each and everybody needs to know that they are deliberate and contribute towards. So that's the first, is accept reality. It's a monstrous task, but it's a fun and rewarding.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're quite right. I mean, we again, I was chatting to someone else, we were talking about how exciting the EX space is around having like these cross-functional teams of people that come in with all these different experiences and are now, so I think, Bill, if I can maybe just reply off the back of that and say, so maybe, you accept that you can't do this all alone, and get excited about the fact that you can build an EX team with people that are coming from data, from psychology, from HR, from legal, from tech, and together you, like a really, really, really diverse team, are actually the people that are going to be able to deliver a wonderful employee experience.
Because, I mean, sorry, just to bring home my themes that I think is important, is because diversity is the one thing that's going to allow you to get there.
Yeah.
In that you have to pull a lot of units together to make it a success. And everybody knows, they know that, but it's sometimes we forget that when we're knee deep in the work. It's okay. EX people are also so hard on themselves to solve everything. So
yes, we should know. But why should you know? You've never worked in IT,
Did I not know that? Yeah.
Okay, and Maahierah, how can people that are listening to this connect with you? Is LinkedIn a good place for you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook. I don't know. It's not aligned to my age. I'm just kidding.
Me either. I also don't.
I don't have Facebook. I have Insta, but it's more private. So LinkedIn is the best. And then my email is my initial and my surname. So shout out to anybody. But generally LinkedIn, I'm very responsive on.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. That was very interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm going to go back and get the privilege of listening to it again and make more notes. But thank you.
No, thank you for having me, Sally. And I know this has been like way overdue, because life happened to both of us. Yeah. And I think that's another thing. As much as we wanted to interact, life happened, and it was moments that mattered to both of us. But we got to do it, and it didn't move away from our interest. It's always amazing chatting to you. So yeah, thank you for having me.